Hey team, welcome back to another episode of the Strength Game Podcast. I'm your host, Nick O'Brien, and this is episode number 126. The Strength Game is a weekly podcast dedicated to discussing all things physical culture with the coaches, athletes, and iron enthusiasts and experts deeply embedded in the strength game on both sides of the profession, both as coaches and as competitive athletes. I want to thank everyone who has liked, shared, commented, has spread the word about the show. Your support allows us to continue to bring on expert guests and highlight more individuals in the strength game, just like our guests today. I also want to thank our sponsors. Family owned and operated since 1976, Samson Equipment has been specializing in full turnkey weight room build-outs from planning to installation. Based in Las Cruces, New Mexico, Samson provides professional weight room solutions for those looking to lead the way in advancing our strength conditioning profession. Coaches have relied on Samson as their top resource for all their weight room renovations because they provide the finest materials and design, product customization, and the most reputable customer service in the business. If you're in the market for elite level strength equipment, weight room renovations, or upgrades, be sure to check out samsonequipment.com to see how Samson has been delivering clients a long-lasting yet affordable product for over 4 decades. Also want to thank our sponsor, Cerberus Strength. Cerberus is trusted by the top strength sport athletes and lifters in the world. Cerberus's wide range of products are made by athletes for athletes, truly living up to its moniker, made by the strong for the strong. Cerberus Strength provides the highest quality strength products on the market, designed and manufactured to help you defeat, destroy, and devour your competition. Be sure to use our promo code STRENGTH_game at cerberusstrength.com to receive 10% off your next order. Also want to thank our sponsor, Sport Kilt. Sport Kilt is the very first company to begin making casual kilts in the USA. Taking the traditional kilt concept, they crafted a casual kilt using modern materials that is perfect for the Highland athletes and casual kilt aficionados alike. Sport Kilt offers an option for people looking for a tartan kilt that is less expensive, comfortable, lighter, and durable. Make the ultimate Celtic statement by checking out the full selection of kilts and stylish kilt accessories at sportkilt.com, and be sure to use promo code TSG to save at checkout. And in this week's episode, I'm joined by Connor Gettemy. Connor is the Director of Sports Performance at Flagler College. Arriving in 2019, he is entering his 6th year overseeing the Sports Performance Department, where he's also in charge of training the men's basketball, volleyball, women's soccer, women's tennis, and women's lacrosse programs. Gettemy began his career in the collegiate sector as an intern coach at Hofstra University and Robert Morris University in 2014. Gettemy was an assistant strength coach at Waldorf University from 2014 to 2016, where then he transitioned to working in the private sector as a sports performance coach at UPMC Lemieux Sports Complex in Pennsylvania from 2016 to 2017, before returning to the college as assistant coach at the University of North Florida in 2017, and then relocating to Flagler. A former college rugby player at Hofstra University and competitive bodybuilder, Gettemy is active in the weight room and trains and conditions multiple times a week while balancing the rigors of the collegiate coaching schedule. He enjoys spending time with his wife, Courtney, when he's not training in the weight room too. Like I said, I'm excited to have the show today. So with all that said, let's get in the game with Coach Connor Gettemy. What's going on, everybody? We are back, and we've got Coach Connor Gettemy on the show today from right down the street at Flagler. What's going on today, man?
How we doing? Good to see you.
Hey, like I said, down the street, we don't get to see each other that often. I think just because our schedules are kind of goofy. You got some ties to where I'm currently at UNF, like 30 minutes up the road, basically. But I'm glad to get you on today. I know with winter break and everything, holidays coming around. I appreciate you coming on so we could share with our audience what you got going on, man.
I appreciate you having me. Thanks a lot.
Hey, so let's dive right into it. Let's kind of get into the roots of how you got started in the strength game, like what kind of sports you played growing up, leading into what you're kind of currently doing, both in the weight room with your athletes and then with yourself.
So athletically, I played every sport growing up. In high school, I say when I say I played football, I mean they were nice enough to give me a jersey and let me run down the field on a kickoff or two. And then in college, I played rugby for a couple of years. Since then, it was weightlifting for a hot second. I did and won a natural bodybuilding competition because there was like two other people that that were competing. Um, but just generally now, trying to just I feel like the thing that mainly drives why I train now is sort of that nobody trusts fat doctors thing. Like, if I can't, not there's plenty of my basketball guys could outlift me at this, that, or the other thing, but I've got to be able to at least put up some respectable weight, especially the older I get. So, as far as kind of uh, what brought me here, I going into college, I was a video and television major. Like I didn't even, I loved lifting weights. Like I've been lifting since I was 13, 14 years old. But I went to Hofstra for video and TV because they've got a great communication school. And a couple semesters in, I decided to switch to exercise science, and I just got really lucky that they also happen to have a really great exercise science department. Some amazing professors there, and that's where I met your boss, Brian Burt. He's pretty. I'll say he's pretty great too. The I did an internship with Hofstra, and that was my first exposure to like college strength conditioning. And within like day one, within the first hour of the first session, I was like, oh yeah, okay, like yeah, I found where I need to be. Um, after graduating, I got I didn't get any GA spots right off the rip, and so I sent an email. I live in Pittsburgh. I'm from Pittsburgh. And I sent an email out to every school I was willing to drive to every day, and just said, "Hey, do you need a volunteer?" And a lot of people know Todd Hammer. He was at Robert Morris for a while, and if you know Todd Hammer, you're not surprised at all that he was like, "Hell yeah, dude, come on down. Like we'll happy to have you." So he was awesome to give me that, and then I got very, very lucky. I got a GA spot that August at Waldorf College. It's now Waldorf University, but it's a tiny little NAIA school in Forest City, Iowa. Um, Working there with Jason, Coach Lauby. He's again phenomenal. He gave me the opportunity to just right off the bat, hey, how many teams do you want? Go start writing programs, which was I couldn't have had a better introduction to okay, this is a big boy job. Just okay, go ahead. And he still gave me some bumpers and a bit of a sandbox to not really mess anything up. And then that led to a brief stint back in Pittsburgh at the Lemieux Center in the private sector, just working with mainly like AAA hockey kids, but a couple of other sports here and there. And then spent 3 semesters at UNF working for Coach Burt, and then that turned into the 6 years that I've spent and counting at Flagler.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, it's you named a lot of people that we kind of have in common too. Obviously, like from your time here, UNF and with Coach Bird and some of the Hofstra staff that we've had on. Todd Hammer's been on. He's a staple, I think,
Yeah.
on the show, or like has some sort of connection to a ton of people that we've spoken with and the audience has already heard from too. So it's no surprise that like there's more people out there that have had some sort of connection with them as a full time or just coming to visit or has been an intern like through RMU or some of the other places he's been at as well. And that's awesome. I think you're for sure I think you got to be the first person that was a TV like television like video major before they turned to the dark side and like went strength to conditioning. So that I think that's a first for anybody we've had on. It's an interesting transfer, but somehow it worked out well for you in the end, and obviously you've been in the profession in different capacities like NAIA level, D2 level, D1 level, private sector. Like that's a ton of experience to like kind of get your feet wet and then bring more experience to like where you're actually into a head role. Was there anything like out of those different type of schools and like different type of settings that you think like most coaches don't really get the opportunity to do? Because like private sector obviously is different. Like working with hockey, some people never get that. D2 has different rules and things like that. But like maybe some of the coaches that you see as assistants or interns that come through you, like something that they're missing. Is there something from your experiences that you hope more coaches would kind of go out and seek to be in different settings to garner like a broader base before they really kind of set their roots down in one place?
I'll say that everywhere I've been, and this even includes my freaking high school teachers, my college professors, and then everybody that I've worked for. Um, I've the amount of luck that I've had in either learning from or working under or both from those types of people, every single one of them had a vested interest in seeing me develop into something better than what I currently was. So a lot of managers or a lot of head coaches, like managers with employees or head coaches with assistants or assistants with interns, whatever it is. A lot of times they could sort of you run the risk of just apathy of just like I manage these people and that's about it. I'm going to make sure that they do their jobs, but I'm not compelled to see them take that next step, and I'm not blaming it like whatever that can happen for a number of different reasons. Um, but I was very lucky, whether it was Dr. Sell at Hofstra taking the time to get to know me enough that she could even suggest that I intern with that I do an internship with the strength department because I was looking around at like PT places, and she was like she told me straight up like don't bother with that, you should go do this internship, and she wouldn't have known that unless she got to know me, which she did. She made an effort to. Um, Working with Coach Burt, like instead of me just being an intern, so I was his intern at Hofstra, and then I was his assistant again at UNF. So when I was his intern, instead of just seeing me as somebody that could help clean up the weight room and set up and break down stuff, like I sure did that, but he made it a point to work me in to sessions as much as possible to the point where it might have been either cross country or tennis, but like there were times where he would be like, "You good? Cool," and he'd just leave the room and just let me coach an entire team, which was amazing. And then when I was his assistant at UNF, he would talk to me a lot about, uh, I went to this staff meeting and here's what happened from the standpoint of like, if you want to be a director, if you want to be in charge, here's the way, here's a lot of personalities that you're going to have to manage, or like, here's how you're going to have to sort of navigate these office politics. So like again, he just like made sure I was really prepared to take the next step. And then in between that, working with whether it was Coach Hammer, I just don't want to leave anybody out, Coach Laube, even Coach Lauren Goldenberg. I worked for him at in Pittsburgh. Like all of those guys made sure that I was ready to take the next step. So I guess like to answer the question, you know, you can't exactly do this until you are working there. Like the answer is go find a place where you're working for somebody that cares about your development. Oh, great, that's all well and good, but a little kind of much easier said than done. But all I can really say, speaking from experience, is I kind of don't have an excuse to fail simply because every single person at every single level that I worked at made sure to take the time to go, let's make sure this guy is prepared to do the next best thing. So I've just been, I don't even know if I necessarily have any advice outside of use that as arguably your main criteria. Obviously, you got bills to pay and different things like that. But if you, for whatever reason, if you can tell, or if you're able to ask the type of questions that will inform you a little bit more of how bought in are these people at in terms of staff development or professional development or things like that. I think that is one of, if not the single most significant thing that has helped me get to where I am.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing to focus on. And I don't know if it gets lost on a lot of young coaches coming up. And obviously, like some of the logos and and like the bigger name schools or just like the NIL deals and like TV publicity for some of those sports, like people want to be in those big time jobs. And like there's nothing against any of them too, but I think a lot of the times when you're starting to look at that stuff, you're focusing on the wrong thing because you want to be in a position, especially young in your career, where someone is more focused on your potential and your development. And rightfully so, as like a coach coming into a spot, you want to see if that person is exactly like you talked about with some of the coaches you had, is invested in you and wants to use you more than just like a cleaning tool or just someone that's going to write down and record numbers. Like
Yeah.
it's a two-way street when it comes to hiring someone. Like you want them to be bought into what you're doing, and at the same time, you want to be bought into like kind of what they're selling and what they're about. So if you go into it and whoever is either the person hiring you or your direct supervisor when you get there or the staff is all about developing and kind of pushing the envelope and getting better and wants you to be just as polished and like figure your stuff out too, because you make the department, you make the teams better, you make the staff better, then that's a really great place to be. And I think, like you said, when you do those sort of things, you set yourself up for the next job. Like if your boss is the one that's mentoring you and like kind of helping you and kind of trickling that information like Bert was, like from the meetings that you're not a part of, that's and you kind of listen and get feedback from him and you're invested in what's going on, you set yourself up for a really good um, position to be in, like when the next step comes, if that
Yeah,
makes sense.
like you want to your priority should be, and I'm repeating what you just said. Your priority should be, how is this going to help me get better at my job? So, I think two of the best examples, you can say this to strength coaches and they're like, what are you talking about? Of course, everybody knows what that is. But by and large, there's not a lot of people outside of the strength and conditioning community that could name Elon or Salisbury. But those two places, they're not Oregon, they're not Ohio State, but everything that I've ever seen or heard come out of that place is just those places is outstanding, whether it's the people or the content I see on social media or whatever. So if it's all right, I could be this volunteer assistant at, I don't know, X D1 institution. What are the chances that I am actually going to get to either coach or program or whatever, or even just be able to sit down with my supervisor and pick his brain, as opposed to, well, they're smaller schools or it's a lower level or whatever. But like, you find me somebody that's come out of those places that isn't a good strength coach, and I'll call you a liar.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think obviously, like, I don't know if it's people that come from smaller schools or have been in those places, like where we kind of see the gravitas like of the D1 or like why people like go to those places. Like that there's nothing against them and there's a lot of really
Yeah.
quality schools out there, but we know some of the limitations and there's differences with all of them too, but we see the limitations and how kind of adaptable and like creative and like thinking on the fly that you have to be when you're at a smaller school. Like the weight room's smaller or the rules are different, like for you and like Division 3 schools, NAI schools have different rules and everything too.
Yeah.
The amount of resources you have, the staff you have, like it just it's a broader base that you have when you kind of start working with lesser teams or maybe you're traveling with teams, you have more responsibilities that fall outside the weight room like admin or you're in a director role, like it gives you the base to kind of like draw upon and like coaching becomes second nature in a way because you've already gone through so many experiences having 10 teams or
Exactly. And that's exactly what I like at Waldorf. I won't even take the time to count them up, but I did everything from bowling to freaking assisting with football and softball, volleyball, like everything in between. Like, and I remember I I've got I'm 23 years old. I've got one group warming up in the hallway and that I'm keeping an eye on, through the windows of the weight room. I've got a second group that's just starting their lift, and I've got a third group that's over on the other side of the room that's just finishing up, and all three of them are different sports. Like that was incredible. That was amazing experience. And I was like, well, I better like shore up my organizational skills and my ability to manage a room and my problem solving and all that. Like I couldn't have found a better environment for that.
Yeah, trial by fire and like kind of getting thrown to the wolves when some of those positions, it's the best thing for you. Like you
100%.
in the matter of a semester, maybe the first week, first year, whatever it is, you learn more than some people. Like not only learn, but you experience it like firsthand. And sometimes you're falling flat on your face, and
Oh yeah.
sometimes like there's a little bit of success with it, but you're learning so much in that amount of time because you're taking it through a fire hose and you have nothing left to do but kind of shake it off because the next team is outside warming up
Yeah, you're
or
gonna learn
the
whether you
two
like it
teams
or not.
back there warming up.
Yeah.
Hey, so a lot of stuff has kind of changed between your first year and like going into your sixth year now at Flagler, but we already kind of talked about some of the like your mentors you had and the experiences you had that kind of like you said almost prepared you for the next job. But what were some of the things maybe when you first took over the program, like at Flagler, that maybe were some things that no coach can really kind of prepare you for, or things that maybe you wish going into the job you knew a little bit more of so that you could kind of still stay in the weight room and have some focus on that. Like what are some of the things that most people don't understand is like on a director's plate that you can't really do until you're in that seat?
Well, so what you kind of ended with, like, what's something that people don't know is that is on a director's plate. It's not so much that I won't necessarily name something specific, but it's just how much of your job isn't being on the floor. There's not once a week, but maybe a couple times a month where I'm barely in the weight room at all, simply because I have, hour by hour by hour by hour, it's either an individual meeting, a staff meeting, or just some other thing that needs to get done um, in order to keep things running. So, and that's I'll say the longer that I've been here, the fewer of those days I have. But they're definitely, and I still have it. I just had one of those days yesterday, actually. I don't actually get into the weight room until 4 p.m. or whatever it is. So perhaps sort of that something to just generally prepare for is like if you're one of the perks of being an assistant is you just get on the floor, coach, you just coach your ass off, and you're done for the day. Uh, the drawback is you got somebody to listen to, or you got maybe your programming is dictated a little bit by your supervisor or by the head strength coach or whatever it is. Like there's a line that you have to toe. Um, Being a director, you get to decide what that line is, which is the perk, but there's just so many other things that go into making sure uh, everything looks like it's running well. That doesn't like the coaching is the easy part. Maybe that's the succinct way to say it is the coaching is the easiest part. Everything else is more difficult. The organization, the financials, the office politics, and the management of either your staff or your relationships with your coworkers. All those other things have nothing to do with sets and reps and barbells.
Yeah, and I don't think you can necessarily escape that, but I think you're absolutely right. Like as an assistant, you don't get exposed to that quite as often, and you can kind of hide in the dungeon a little bit more of the weight room versus have to go to some of those board meetings or be
Mhm.
in projected meetings like departmental things, whatever it comes down to. But you're right. Yeah, the coaching becomes easier, and your kind of reward for that is to be in meetings to tell people at least fight for the rest of your staff and why you should be in the weight
Yeah,
room more. It's probably
yeah,
the
yeah.
Hey, so within your time, like there's got to be a lot of things that have kind of like changed from year one to year six. Obviously, like you've got more experience with being a director, like managing the staff, like changes in teams and things like that. What have been some of like the big projects or big things that like you focused on, like moving from year one to year two, like up to this point, like being a little bit more vested in the program, like what are the things that you think from year to year increase as as you're at a place for longer?
I think so. Upon taking the job, so not even year one, like month one, I remember reaching out. I mainly checked in with four people: Coach Lauby at Waldorf, Coach Bird at UNF, Coach Hammer, who I think had left Robert Morris, and Coach Staub, Joe Staub, who was Bert's boss at Hofstra. And I checked in with all four of them, and I was like, I'm 27 and I just got a director position. What do I do, basically? And I name all of them because I forget who gave me this specific piece of advice, but probably the single best thing that I was told was just like don't even do anything for a week. Just show up, dress nice, introduce yourself, and let things run how they run. So that one, you can kind of take stock of, okay, here's how things are done. Um, and then from there, you can decide, like, somebody said, like, someone's probably doing something right. Like, if you just show up and immediately you're just like, throw everything out, and we're just going to implement my thing, top to bottom. Well, there might have been there's going to be challenges unique to that school that you couldn't possibly have known until you actually took the job and got in and and had the problem presented to you. And they might have already come up with a really, really good solution. And if you just throw it out, you're not fostering any sort of positive rapport or cooperation. Like right off the bat, everyone's going to be like, "Oh, okay, it's his way or the highway," as opposed to show up and tell everybody, I bet you guys have some great ideas. I bet there's a lot of stuff that's going really well right now. So all I'm going to do is let things run how they run for the first week, and I'm just going to see what tweaks I think would be best. So at the time, it was there was the staff upon the day I was hired, it was a full-time director and a paid intern with very, very little stipend. And Rob at the time, Coach Reeves uh, was that paid intern. And so rather than me showing up and saying, "All right, let me take care," I'm here now. I was like, "You do you, man. Like, hey, you've been running." Like he was running the show during the whole search, so he'd been keeping the department afloat for at least a couple of weeks, if not a couple of months. So it would have been totally remiss, and I would have just been a dick if I told him like, "Okay, thanks for everything. Now fall in behind me." It was, this place better than I do, so why don't I just take at least a couple of days and learn from you? And I think that was hugely beneficial because there was a lot of stuff that people were doing right. And so I took stock of everything and decided, okay, this stuff I'm not going to touch at all. This stuff I think we can do a little bit better. This stuff I don't want to keep doing. I want to switch that out. Um, so the first, I'd say, 2 years there weren't any fires to put out, anything like that. But the first 2 years, it was kind of just let me get some things shored up and get things running how I want them to run, have the expectations set, get people used to the way I want things done, so to speak. And that's not, there's no less egotistical way to say that, but it has nothing to do with me mattering. It's that, this I think I have enough good idea. I think I have the department's best interests at heart, and we need to implement these things in order to see that happen. So after the first year or two, um, I kind of was thinking in 1 year blocks of what can we do this year? Okay, great. What can we do next year? Okay, great. And some of those things were, can we start providing food for the athletes? We didn't have any nutrition whatsoever, and for a while it was me stopping at the closest gas station before I got in that morning to coach the first team and just buying all their bananas. And now it's up to a point where every coaching staff contributes a certain percentage of money based on their roster compared to the entire athletic, student athlete population. Um, So that's a consistent yearly thing that everybody contributes to, no questions asked. Next was tech. Like, we don't have any way to test people other than stopwatches. What can we do? Well, let's at least get a jump mat. What's a cheap alternative to Tendos? V-Troops. Okay, great. Let's get those. Are we fundraising at all? No, we're not. Okay, well, let's get some branded apparel and start selling it to the athletes. So all of just as some examples, all of those things were kind of in that yearly mindset of what can we do this year? What can we do next year? So on and so forth. Now, this is the first time, like, it's finally kind of set in after 6 years of like, okay, I might still be here a while. Like, this is the first time that it's a very, as you and anybody else listening to this probably knows, like, strength and conditioning is a very volatile industry. And so whether it's, if you're a GA, 2 years tops. If you're an assistant, it's not 2 years tops, but there might be a high likelihood that you either find some new place, or if you're at a high level Power Five, the whole staff is gone, so on and so forth. So it's taken a number of years for my mindset to even arrive at, well, yeah, we have the luxury of planning for the future, so let's start to do that. And so that's kind of my next big thing, is developing a multi-year plan of, all right, what is realistic? Like, where do we want to be? What are even the right questions to ask? Getting a good understanding of the financial health of the entire institution, and then within that, the athletic department, and then within that, the likelihood and willingness to spend on things that are deemed necessary. And aligning my plans with our athletic director's plans and our individual coaches' plans. So I'll say that what I'm currently working on is my plan for the next 3, 4, 5 years of, what's something that might take a couple of years, but I'm planning on being around for it. So let's implement.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think a lot of people don't recognize that, because you see like big projects happen, you see like weight rooms get built, you see like staffs increase and things like that. And we were kind of talking before we got going, like, people see like the fruition of something happen and they think it's like an overnight success, but they don't see like all the hard work that goes into it, like consistently, to get that quote unquote overnight success. And as a head coach or an assistant, or like you said, it's very volatile. You don't know when your next job is going to be, like when you're going to be relieved of your job without any consent from yourself, or any agreement or want to actually leave that position. So
Mhm.
you have to kind of think in chunks and like think in one
Yeah.
year increments and kind of work towards that. And maybe they're just kind of baby steps to kind of fix an immediate problem or something that you can really handle. But it's unfortunate because it should be more strategic, where what you're doing in the strength conditioning department aligns with what sports medicine is doing, what is aligning with the whole athletic department and the school's vision to kind of bolster everything and build together and be on the same mission. But when you're not going to be there, when you don't know if you're going to be there
Yeah.
for the next couple of years, it's hard to like have a multi-layer, like phased out project like you're talking about, when there's just not much consistency, and like we're signing 1 year contracts, or that
Right.
can be terminated whenever they say.
Yeah. And so and there's no guarantees. I mean, Coach Hammer was at Robert Morris for what seemed, for by strength and conditioning standards, an eternity, but still left. So there's I am as without making any assumptions, this is the safest I can feel, just in terms of the number of years, looking at my own performance reviews and looking at the reviews of the weight room and the staff that we get from the athletes. Like, I can, as safely as one could say, it seems like we're in a good spot right now. So if there were a time to start planning for a future, I can't really think of a better one. Like, I don't really have an excuse anymore of what we just said, of like, well, it's an unstable industry. there's a lot of change, and like, yes, those are all still true, but you can't, if you're a director of somewhere, you should be pushing for progress and trying to develop the department as best you can. So you can only lean on that for so long before it's like, all right, well, time to take a risk here, like time to really start pushing something.
Yeah, and now you have the support and like you have the feedback from the rest of the department and like your athletic director and the teams and the coaches that now you can kind of push the envelope more and be like, hey, Lisa, we could take a bigger step now. Like I think I have the confidence. Like we've been doing stuff yearly. We've been showing progress, like looking back from year one and going into year six and beyond. Like now we can start to actually take some big chunks out of the strategic plan. That
Yeah.
kind of drives into like one thing I wanted to ask you too, which was we talked about like what you kind of made you a little bit more comfortable about taking these bigger steps and looking at like loftier goals that might not be able to be accomplished in just a single year or semester. And like you said, just like performance reviews and like the feedback you're getting and like being able to chip away and bring on new things to Flagler. How do you kind of go about evaluating or like providing feedback to like some of your staff members too? Because like we talked about, you're the most consistent thing in that department, like in the strength conditioning department. You've been through multiple assistants and interns and things like that, and they're going to kind of move on. How do you kind of prepare them for the next job and like provide them feedback so they can grow in their role, but understand that like they might not be a part of this 3-year plan, this 3-year goal that you're going to have, like, but what can they do in this time so that you can give them feedback, but also contribute in their own way?
I try to be the general answer is foster as healthy of an environment as possible in terms of I want them to know beyond a shadow of a doubt that I have their advancement at heart. So um, I had an assistant one time, or she was a paid intern, and she got a job offer, and I didn't want her to leave in the sense that she was organized, responsible. She did the job very well. Um, but I also, it was a full-time job. So, we had an honest conversation, and I did my best, and I was just open about it. I was like, look, I am not going to try to guilt you into staying. I would like you to because you're an asset to this department, but you you need to do what's best for you. And so I'm not going to tell you you should or should not go. I'm just going to be here as something to as a person to bounce ideas off of, or just talk to. She ended up staying a little while longer, and has since moved on. But I think that'd be the overall answer is I just had a conversation with one of my current assistants today about the possibility of advancement, and the conversation was entirely what can I do to help. It wasn't any sort of like you're putting us in a bind, man. Like he doesn't need to hear that. And it doesn't matter. Like I can't with how volatile the industry is. I can't sit here and waste any of my energy being like, man, wallowing in any sort of uh, self pity. This is the reality of the industry. I'm not going to try to rail against it, and not only that, but it's my obligation as somebody that worked for dozens, or benefited from dozens of people pushing for what's best for me. I have an obligation to now facilitate that for the people underneath me. So if that's reaching out to my own contacts and seeing if there's an available GA spot here, or if they're open for an assistant, or if it's offering, hey, these are the application materials that I submitted to these jobs. Let's sit down and go over them, and let's see how these can help you. Like whatever possible action there is that I can take to best benefit them. That's what I want to do. And so I just need to. The priority is to make sure that I am as open about that as possible, and I am encouraging an environment where there's no sort of, oh, I don't want to tell him that he's going to get pissed, or like I better not tell him that I'm applying for this because he's going to be upset. Like, no, dude, hell yeah, like you should apply for this. Hey, I found this, did you apply for it? I need to have that same advancement and developmental mentality that everybody had for me.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and it's really nice to hear like from a director. Obviously, for anybody that are looking for jobs, that's again like when you're interviewing for positions, like that's what you want. That's what you hope that you're going to get from a director too. Like if you're not going into the head position, or even if you are and you're like interviewing with different members of like administration that are going to be your supervisors, you hope that they have that same mentality too, that they understand like we can't retain, even if it's the best, quote unquote, the best position in the country. Like it's not everybody's best position or like the
Yeah,
most sought after one. You still understand that like it's not usually not a forever job. People are going to move on. People's goals are going to change. Like what they want to do with their careers is going to change. They're going to retire, whatever it's going to be. But you want to make sure that you have like an open, honest conversation with your supervisor, and they have your best interest in mind, and you can share that with them because we know the industry. Like there's no surprise when people are going to leave. Like
yeah,
like what your goals are like are not necessarily what my goals are, and like there's going to be a point in time where we split paths like to pursue those goals differently. Like the support that you have from your supervisor, like your boss, like you want that so that you can share it, and you can leave on good terms because our paths are going to cross again too, like in this
yeah,
profession. That's got to be like in the back of people's minds too, otherwise there's a problem. But when it comes to like those coaches too, like I think when you're telling them like you have your best interest in mind, like you want them to be honest with you too, like not blackballing them, not like kind of being selfish and trying to hold on to them. Like I think that's a good complaint to have when you go to like your AD or whoever your supervisor is, because you tell them like, hey, I can't facilitate keeping this person. I don't have the
right,
resources. Like these are the things that they want. What are we able to provide? It's nothing. If you keep losing types of people like that, like there's the writing on the wall to try to retain it. And if it's position where we kind of know where it is, where it's always rotating, like that's the three year like step. Like, hey, how can we get
yeah,
more staff? How can we make this position more inviting? How can we keep better coaches around longer and be consistent with it? But I think you're doing a good job with that. And obviously, like how you treat the staff and how you try to retain them, but you understand like they got to spread their wings at some point. You can't offer them everything. Like
yeah.
they're more apt to come back too, or whatever, offer
Yeah.
people for you in the future too.
I mean, the most obvious example is I wouldn't have even known about the Flagler job had Bert not told me about it. Like literally, and it wasn't even like we were in a meeting and he like formally was like, "Hey, I want you to get." He literally would like I was on the floor doing like a coaching a makeup lift or something, and he just walks through the front door and just in passing is like, "Hey, there's a director job down in St. Augustine," and like fast forward 5 weeks, and I that was my first day at Flagler, so like I literally wouldn't be where I was unless if not for my supervisor that thought to himself, "Hey, that's close by. Hey, that's an appropriate next step for him. I better tell him about it."
Yeah, that's a good point too. Like coaches that like have are looking out for stuff like that and understand like they're realistic about the position that their
Yeah,
staff is in, understand like how strength conditioning works, like how the area works, or even specifically for you too, like your goals, like staying in the area, like being a director, staying in the area, like he was mindful of those things to share it with you and understand like, hey, I could lose a good coach, but at the same time, like this this is a great opportunity and falls more in lines with like what Connor wants to do. Like
sure.
I can't hold him back from this. And
Yeah,
like you don't want to lose someone, but at the same time, like you hate to see him go, but like that is the right thing to do as well.
yeah.
Hey, so we talked a little bit about it, like just with your staff and how you're supporting them. Like obviously, if they move on, but I know you've done some like creative things like within the department to try to create like a better atmosphere, a better like financial situation, and just kind of working environment with your athletes. Like how have you kind of worked and at the same time we'll kind of branch us off to like your own brand, like Get Strong Performance and everything too, because I think there's a fine line between the two, but they kind of build off each other. How have you kind of set up like that environment with the athlete, well, not the athletes, but with your assistant coaches to kind of give them an opportunity to like make a little bit more ends meet, like coach outside of just what they're doing with Flagler, and then we'll kind of caveat that over to your own brand and everything too.
Mhm. Well, so that's kind of what I was left with. Like, in no, I am very lucky to have the administration that I do, and that's not one guy that's doing well, and then there's a couple of people that could be doing better. Like top down, AD, associate AD, everybody underneath. Like very, very fortunate the to have them advocate for support staff, and I mean not just us, but sports medicine too. Like we're in a very good spot, and the reason I'm prefacing and I'm kind of saying this initially is because I know that if I ever go to them and I say, what can we do about X, Y, and Z? And they say, sorry, our hands are tied, I believe them. Call me naive, whatever you want to say. But I feel like I've been here long enough and I know these people well enough that when they tell me, look, we're going to try our best, but we can't make any promises, they really are. So again, all that preface to say, chances are that I've got it's me full time. I have a full time assistant, and then we have a stipend coach. I don't see anything could happen, and I will, and year by year, I continue to advocate, but I don't see a lot of movement on that anytime soon for a number of reasons, all of which are out of anyone's hands. There's nobody to blame because I don't blame anybody because there's no one to blame. So once I saw that, once I kind of read the writing on the wall, I was like, okay, so if you want any meaningful change in that number, you're gonna have to figure out a way to provide that yourself. So then that goes into so then I just started thinking of ideas. I'm like, all right, what do I do? Uh, and what I came up with was kind of the obvious one that any college strength coach, it's okay, they're training some people on the side. And I basically was like, well, what if I could scale that up big enough that not only are my assistants employees of Flagler, but they're also I-9 employees with my own company. And this was all, none of it existed, and it's still in its infancy as we speak. But if you want to talk about 3 to 5 year goals, like that's what it is. It's look, I don't need to go to my administration to ask for more money for so and so because I can just provide it myself by giving them these responsibility or by giving them these clients. So that's the if if I want to make more money, if I want to make a significant amount more money, the answer is go find a better job. Like if you're in strength conditioning for the money, you are in the wrong industry. So I get a great degree of fulfillment, and I very much enjoy the job that I currently do. So again, whether it's for my assistants or for myself or whatever, anybody affiliated with Flagler Sports Performance, I am going to have to provide that. So that's the long-term idea is let's develop positive relationships with I'll back up a second. The strategy moving forward was um, I had to ask myself, how do I go about it's one thing to pick up a couple of clients here and there. It's another to start an entire business. So how the heck am I gonna go about doing that? And the answer was go out to individual high schools and provide as much value as I can. And we talked about earlier, like, or we talked before we started, like how wasting money isn't great, but you can only waste a certain amount of money, but you can waste all the time in the world. So what I decided was I'm gonna instead of spending money on advertising and reaching a whole bunch of people, I will instead spend time going out to these high schools and talking to these sport coaches and talking to these athletic directors. And I reach fewer people and it takes longer, but the likelihood that people are interested and buy into what I want to do is a lot higher. He's not a strength coach anymore, and he's kind of out of the strength coach realm. But Kier, like the rugby strength coach, I can't pronounce his last name, Wenham Flat or whatever you
Yep.
want to call it. Call me Kier. It was his idea. I was working with him, and that's kind of how we came up with the whole, use the resources that you have available to you. So I'm in a very fortunate position in that uh, things are running well enough that instead of being at the facility until 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night, there's more staff. There's more. I can trust them with more responsibilities. So now, an early morning or a late night, I can instead spend at a high school giving a presentation. And so what we have started to foray into is, I don't have a better way to describe it, but sort of concierge training, which is, look, if you guys want to come to us, if you want to come to Flagler's weight room and train with us after hours, cool. What's much more likely and what is much more convenient for people is your high school has a weight room and you guys already go to that high school, so you're all already there. Let us come to you and we'll train you in your own weight room. And so that's kind of what we're in the middle of establishing right now. And so the idea is, X number of years down the road, we have enough consistent business, so to speak, that I can say, okay, assistant A, not only are these your teams at Flagler, but these two high school teams are yours as well, and you're going to get paid this much, and you're going to take care of them on this weekend day or before or after hours, whatever it is. So then, I'm able to supplement their income while still fulfilling all of my obligations to Flagler.
Yeah, it's a good model. And I've seen it have success before. Like I didn't do it at one of the schools I was at, but a lot of friends that were there and kind of like passing with me were part of that contract. Like at Georgetown, that's what we used to do. A lot of people would go intern with the university at Georgetown, and
Mm-hmm.
through their partner Sisu Systems, like they would be contracted with a local high school, like a private high school in the DC area. And that's who would be the one actually one paying them. And they
Right.
would go do the same thing, like either the class setting, like where it's a group of athletes coming in, or if it's a specific team in their weight room. So it's even better too as a young coach, because now you get to work with high school age athletes and you get to work with college age athletes too. So we talked about at the very beginning, like all that exposure to different levels of the university level, private sector, like youth athletes and things like that. If you want to get the like waste as little time as possible and really like dive 2 feet in head first into strength and conditioning, like there's no better way than to do that, like to get paid and to actually do both of those realms at the same time. Because I'm sure like once this like really gets rolling and like you find your groove with this, you'll probably have a couple of those coaches where maybe high school strength conditioning is really their calling, or maybe this solidifies that some really want to stay in college, but developing those relationships, like it kind of sets Flagler up for success too. It sets you up for success, and like those coaches, like it's one of those win-win-win situations for everything. And I hope it keeps taking off. And I know hopefully with a little bit more time, being over there, you're going to get more people in those positions and have more kind of clients working with you.
Yeah, and you mentioned Flagler, like that's the kind of the one thing I forgot to address. Like, I is it convenient for me that this is a money making enterprise? Obviously, um, but genuinely, I do think that reflects well on the school. So obviously, like if we're going out to at high school A, and we're training these teams, it's not the Flagler Sports Performance staff that's doing it. It's the Get Strong Performance staff. Because, like I said, they would. It's not. I would be paying. My assistant is picking up a paycheck from me, and it's not under the table. Do everything above board. They are hired by my company, and then we're providing uh, those services. But end of the day, I make sure to do this. I never want any sort of compliance or conflict of interest or anything like that. But end of the day, people are still going to know me as the director of sports performance at Flagler. So the more positive experiences, a coach hires my company to train their team, and it goes really, really well. Everybody sees a lot of gains. Everybody stays relatively injury free. Then that I even at least secondarily has to reflect well on the institution, and then it's community engagement. It's developing a positive rapport with athletic directors and individual coaches. So as you said, win, win, win. However many parties are involved, I think it's a win for everybody.
Yeah, that was more succinct and a lot better presented than I said it. Like just thinking about the compliance side of it and conflict of interest and obviously like the LLC and all those things. And yeah, it's secondarily, but like people draw their own conclusions and things like that too. Like if a young athlete knows that like Get Strong Performance is like where I got better, what made me a better athlete, and oh, to get like the owner and the head coach of Get Strong Performance is also the coach at Flagler, like maybe I want to go to Flagler. It's like, it happens. Like it's they're separate in a way, but you can't take a like separate like the entities behind it in a way. And you do
Yeah,
you know the performance side, you know all the logistics side of it a lot better than I too. So I'm gonna defer all the professionalism over to you.
yeah, and I just today I made a joke about how many phone calls I've made to our compliance director for that very reason of like, are you sure? If I go give a presentation, or if I train somebody on campus, or if I go to a weight room, it's like every single time it's like, you're positive, right? Because the last thing as I just said, uh, it reflects well on the college. Well, if this is done poorly, or if it's done kind of under the table, or if it's done unprofessionally in one way or the other, then not only is it not positive, it's not neutral, it's a negative. It reflects very poorly. So, the emphasis is absolutely, are we doing this correctly? Are we doing this above board? Is this all within the confines of an acceptable way to do things? And so, we're all good in that regard.
Yeah, if all those things are checked off, like it should be a no-brainer, but it goes to show that like these things like this can be done. And I think a lot of coaches in the past, I don't know if it's still kind of a thing, like the hassle of going through all those things and having those conversations with compliance or administration and stuff like that. Obviously, that's not the first thing you do when you go to a school. It's not the first
Right.
thing you do as a director. And obviously, being in year six, like you said, it's still in the infancy. Like it's probably been in the back of your mind for quite a few years. And it's getting closer to like it's launching, but it's like getting closer to like developing more and more and more. It's not something you do right off the rip, but it can be done and it needs to be
Right.
done the right way. But I think a lot of coaches either invest everything into like their main job and like just the university, not to say that you're not, but it's still a viable option to kind of go out there and branch out and do a little bit more and do things for your staff, do things for your own kind of side business as well. But it
Yeah.
it definitely is something that can be done.
Yeah. And it has to, it can't in any way, like when I first floated the idea past my wife, the very first thing out of her mouth was like, well, what about Flagler? And that's a very valid thing. Like, it's, I don't want to be stealing a living. So you're correct in that, year 1 to 3 or even later than that, like all of my attention had to be solely on getting these systems set up, making sure everything runs as smoothly as it possibly can. And then it's not to say that I'm doing less uh, of at my job, but it's okay. These systems have been put in place, and now there is that affords. The quality isn't going to drop if I suddenly start to focus some of my brain energy on this other enterprise. So there's a certain period of time where it was like 100% of my energy needs to go into this so that I can make sure the quality is so that we build up to a level where we can consistently provide high quality training. And then once it's there, it doesn't just stay there by itself. It requires, systems to keep it in place. But once the systems are established and it's being kept in place, that's much easier and much simpler and much less taxing than getting them up there in the first place. So now that I know I'm able to ensure that a quality service is being provided for my athletes at Flagler, then I can slowly but surely start to try to enrich my assistants. Because end of the day, like that's again, I mentioned how it's very convenient that this is making me money. Yes, but ultimately, I'm helping Flagler employees make more money, which ensures, or not ensures, but increases the likelihood that they stick around longer than a year or 2 years or whatever. So it all going back to win-win-win. I don't see how it's anything but.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like obviously the quality can't drop at your main job, and that's a valid point by your wife. And then it's also like that's what you got involved in the very beginning too. So unless you're jumping ship, like you can't let that stuff falter. That's why a lot of people I think sit on those ideas for a long time and
Yeah.
maybe like completely switch over at one point in time. Like balancing that I think is difficult for a lot of people. But I think you're right too. Like how much invested that you have into it, it it gives back to like the rest of your staff. It gives back and like secondarily helps everything that you're already doing. Obviously, it makes you money and stuff like that, but it's it's a byproduct of things that you've already put in place,
Right.
and nothing else is suffering from that. It's actually only enriching it. I mean, if we don't want to go cause and effect it, I think it still is. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Hey, so when you actually kind of went about that process, was there, I know there's a lot of stuff like compliance wise and everything university side, but maybe outside of what it is for a college like coach, was there anything that like maybe was really difficult when it came to like starting up the LLC or kind of anything along the way that like maybe was your initial thought process and like had you switch like Mm. What was kind of like, was this always kind of the inception of what you thought this would be, or is it as it shifted from that to kind of fit to what it is now?
Um, it shifted a little bit in that I initially started with a more sports specific niche. I had initially started with soccer, and actually it's maybe not shifted a lot, but it has shifted. The answer is yes, it's shifted. So at first it was I'm gonna do uh, I'm gonna do small group training at my Flagler facility and I'm gonna market it to girls and women's soccer. St. Johns County is just there's like 3 or 4 top 15 nationally ranked teams just in St. Johns County. It's just insane. Um, and so I thought, okay, cool, I'm going to do that. And I reached out to every high school coach, every club coach. I counted it up the other day. I 500 some separate contacts. That's not emails. That's just people. And I got zero. So just a discouragingly embarrassing amount of a lack of numbers in terms of responses back. And that wasn't even me trying to get people to sign up for anything. That was just me offering the free seminar. Like I was trying to give away my time at hours at a time. I was trying to tell people, let me come by and I'll just tell your athletes for an hour how to sleep better, eat better, and train better. And you don't even have to pay me, and I'll come to you. And no, and everybody was like, nobody even answered me back, let alone said, no, we're not interested. So I make it sound that dire to explain how then I was like, okay, you know what? Screw it. I'm just gonna go every sport. I just need somebody to answer me. I just need to hear from someone. And so slowly but surely, lacrosse, a girls basketball, some soccer eventually did come around. So um, the getting the seminars going and getting people interested in the value that I had to provide them. And what frustrated me was every single time, the rare time that I did give one, the feedback from the coaching staff and from the parents or whoever else was there was universally, wow, that was great. That was awesome. Like, thanks for coming by. And in my head, I was always like, I know it's great. Like, why won't more people answer me? Um, and so, and now I've probably given, oh, I don't know, probably 18 to 20 seminars over the course of the last year. Um, and but then I also pivoted from just after kind of looking at a number of different things. Uh, Went from, instead of small group training or individual training, looked at, okay, well, what's something that might be a little bit more unique? Because I essentially looked at, okay, there's all these schools and they're close enough that it's not outrageous, that the travel time isn't outrageous, but every minute further away that somebody is from your facility, it's that much less likely that they're going to bother wanting to come, let alone even just leave the house at all. So to me, it was, well, if one of the biggest pain points is that's another thing that we've got to schedule, that's another that's we've got to go out of our way to get there. It's in St. Augustine, we're up north in Jacksonville, whatever. Uh, I felt if I could remove one of the most significant roadblocks and one of the most significant pain points, travel, or I should say logistics, then I feel like that's a bit more of a unique product and is that much more likely that people are like, oh, okay, we don't even have to do anything extra. We just show up to where we already were. Great. So that's what led to the pivot of, my frustration with my lack of emails responding back to me resulted in the pivot from soccer to just any sport. And then my observation of there's a whole bunch of people offering group training and individual training. Let's look at, what's a different product that I could sell or provide, or what's a different service that I could provide. Then that's what I kind of landed on in terms of, well, let's make this as convenient for them as possible.
Yeah, I think conveniency is definitely something that you have to keep in mind, and it's unfortunate too because like we forget how convenient some of the stuff is, like when we're at the university and athletes are always coming to us because when you're not in the private sector, you have no experience in the private sector. You've been in university setting for as long as both of us kind of have collectively. You almost like expect the athletes to come in. Like
Yeah,
that's just what they do. You don't have to go out and track them down for the most part. Like they're coming in the weight room. It's already scheduled. You don't have to go out and convince them why it's important. I mean, it
right.
might be mandated that they have to come in. Certain teams might not like it, but you're not trying to send 500 emails out to soccer coaches in the area to show them like, hey, I've got something important. I got something that you guys would like to hear and I would like to offer it. And then hearing crickets, like
Right.
that's
And as you just said, like you're convincing somebody that it's a good enough idea. Well, if there's 25 players on a team, what would you rather do? Individually convince all 25 players to come to you, or convince one coach that it's a good idea, and then they say, okay, you come to us.
yeah, that's a great point too. And I think like that mindset and being able and willing, like what you did to pivot and understand like, hey, I have a great idea, but other people have to think it's a great idea. Otherwise, I'm the only one doing it and I'm wasting my time and I'm definitely not getting paid for this. If I
Yeah.
think soccer in the area is a great idea. Like, okay, it might turn around, but it might not be the time for it right now. And like
Mhm.
you said, some of them came around eventually, but it wasn't until you opened it up to other sports and those ones started to do it. And it's sometimes there's no rhyme or reason when it comes to it, but especially like starting off with a new project, like doing your due diligence in the beginning, kind of doing some of the research, putting some feelers out there, and being willing to like be flexible and pivot your ideas.
Mhm.
That's huge. Like kind of shifting a little bit of gears, you've done a bunch of sports yourself, like between rugby, like dabbling in weightlifting, doing bodybuilding, and I mean, you stepped on the platform, so I don't care if there was 1,000 people there or it was just you and however many other guys it was for that one. Like you still did the training and you got to kind of step up there and like show off like the fruition of all that hard work. So how with all the stuff that you're doing between Flagler, Get Strong Performance, like home life and things like that, are you kind of embedding training yourself into like the mix?
Well, again, I do think it comes back to, and you can, it's not to say that this is right, but the visual medium is one of the easiest to consume. And so, I mean, my God, the number of times over the course of 6 years that uh, a coach has brought a recruit in, and like I'm not a big dude. You can tell that I lift weights, but I'm not like some jacked guy walking around with my trapped up to my ears. But even then, I've lost count the number of times that a coach has brought a recruit in and they introduce me and they say, "This is Connor, he's our director of sports performance," and their parent, their dad or their mom will be like, "We know." Like they'll make some joke about like, "Yeah, obviously he is." And as silly as that might be, like whether it's if I'm trying to get somebody to take my training seriously, it'll sure help if I look like I train seriously, you know? So I think it's just an advantage for a million different social reasons as well. That is an entirely other conversation, but just from a standpoint of having people that much quicker and that much more automatically think that you're worth listening to, as incorrect as that assumption is. um, I do think I need to demonstrate to my athletes, bare minimum, the people that I'm coaching, I need to demonstrate to them that I think this is important enough that I keep doing it. So you should do it too, and you should listen to me whenever I tell you to train. Um, but I would say, like by and large, if you if the question is like what is the most significant thing that keeps me training consistently and watching my diet and stuff like that, it's that is that our I one of our coaches kind of makes it a point, if he ever has a recruit up in the weight room and they're talking to me, he will go out of his way to say to highlight that I track my food. Or he'll say, this is Connor, so and so, and as we're talking, he's like, and he'll allude, he'll take the time to be like, yeah, like he tracks his food, he still trains, like he makes it a point to say this guy is the real deal, so to speak, um, so as to sort of drive the message home that you're going to get taken, like training gets taken seriously here, so to speak.
Yeah, that's a good point. And like it's even if it's an incorrect notion or if it's quick, like for people to almost judge a book by its cover, in like this day and age too, like you only get for some recruits, sometimes they might not even tell you there's a recruit coming in. So
Yeah,
if all you have is like a quick handshake and like a walk by, like that's the book. Like that's the cover of
yeah.
the book. That's all you get. And if their impression or like when they're kind of recalling back in like a coach's in the meeting, be like, "Oh, what'd you think of the strength coach?" And be like, "Well, I only met him for 15 seconds, but he looks like he knows what he's doing." Like
Like,
that that's
and that's
enough.
the crux of it. Yeah.
That might be all you get, or like you can actually get in the weeds with some of the parents or the coaches and the like the student athletes that are potentially coming through, and you can kind of dive into the things that you do or what you still currently do, and that I think that keeps it fresh in their mind, but it also keeps you on your toes and you understand like what they're doing from day in and day out versus just kind of trying to recall based off previous experience. Like it's
100%. Yeah. It's a whole lot easier to coach something when you're still coaching yourself through it. Like if you're a heavy RDL or a deep lateral squat or just something that for a fact is going to light something up the next day, then when you're programming it, then you can on the one hand, when you're programming it, you can program it appropriately, and when you're coaching it, you can at the very least relate of like, okay, you feel X, Y, and Z because you should. Like if you're consistently doing it and you program an exercise for yourself because you want it to target a certain muscle or elicit a certain adaptation, then if you become an expert in performing it, then it becomes that much easier to teach it and come up with. If somebody doesn't understand the first cue that always works, well then instead of being screwed, you can, because you have such a great understanding of the movement itself, you can rephrase it or you can present it in a different way, or just deliver it in outside the context of what you're used to, in the hopes that that person that 1 out of 100 that doesn't understand what you mean when you say push your hips back or whatever, you can make sure that you help that person too.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. That deeper understanding and being able to relate to every single athlete that comes in, because some of them think you're speaking French or
Yeah,
hieroglyphics when you come in, and you being able to relate off different experiences and go based off feel, like actually do a demo or like move them into those positions or give them a different cue, whatever it is, like all that stuff are different tools that you've kind of created over time from just coaching reps. But a lot of time it's your own like reps training, because they want to be able to relate on that level of like, honestly, like what it feels like. Most athletes like want to know what it feels like or be able to like mirror you and replicate it. And if you can
right.
demo and if you can explain to them what it feels like and what it should look like that's the same as like an athlete looking at you and be like, oh, they know how to lift. If you can say that, they're like, oh, he does lift, because they
Yeah,
would not know that stuff if you can't show it and if you can't explain it to them too.
yeah, and
Is
all of that, it's perceptual, and you can argue as much as you want about like, well, uh, I know some pretty smart strength coaches that don't train, uh, and that doesn't make them any less like, and they're better strength coaches than me. So that doesn't suddenly, just because I train or I might have a higher bench press than them, it doesn't mean uh, that I'm suddenly a better strength coach than them. But the likelihood that a kid is gonna, as you said, you get 15 seconds, and a kid might pick you over somebody that doesn't look like they walk the walk.
Yeah, that's sometimes that's just what it is. But hey, is there anything in your training right now, or anything like maybe from something you're reading, research, or you've been listening to that's like kind of intriguing to you, or like you're adding either into your own programming or with your athletes that like is kind of new?
Um, I mean, the concept certainly isn't new. I'm reading Strength Deficit by Tim Karen. And it's an obvious concept that some people's some sports and some positions within individual sports are more concentrically dominant versus eccentric, or the strength deficit is really small or really large, and depending on the demands of a particular thing in that sport, you might need a larger deficit or a smaller deficit. So you might want to train more concentrically or more eccentrically. It's not a novel concept. It's not revolutionary by any means. But I definitely, having read that book, it kind of just made me look at my training. And it's not that I think my training is bad, my programming as far as my athletes go. But after reading that book, it kind of reminded me of, you better make sure, within the confines of training them appropriately, and volume and intensity and all that, that you better make sure you're hammering the eccentric. And just because so much training is just there's technically an eccentric and an isometric component to it, but by and large, the reason you're doing that lift is to focus on the concentric. It just by you know that's just how 95% of training is. Nobody goes on bodybuilding.com and looks for an eccentric program. They're just like, okay, push hard, push hard, push, like squat, do the thing. So I think re-emphasizing the other two components of muscle contraction are, it's just good to get to remind myself that those are important. Because I think like the term sport specificity, it's not that it's completely irrelevant to joint angles and mimicking sport movements, but I think the most sport specific things are things that mimic the muscle contraction, the type of muscle contraction in a movement, or in when you're performing this skill, this is the type of muscle contraction that occurs in this muscle and this muscle, so on and so forth. So I think having a good understanding of how to effectively train isometrically, eccentrically, and concentrically is of great benefit. And I've already implementing and making the changes to my programming. I can already see, yep, that works, and so it's easy to follow.
That's awesome. You're the second person in like the last couple of days that have recommended Tim Karen's book. So
And
that's in my queue now.
I'll bet you it's because I know Anthony Cockrell's getting big right now. He's with SMU volleyball, and I'll bet you that's why. Because he's if just on my, I mean, I follow him, but before I even did, he popped up on my For You page so often, and it was his, and the posts that would get the most traction were his like overloaded eccentrics posts, where it's like 120% on the way down, weight releasers, then explode up. Those are the ones that I see go viral the most. So I'll bet you that, and he, on the few podcasts that he's done, I know he's talked about strength deficit and Tim Karen, because that's why I started reading it. So I'll bet you I bet you that's why, if I had to guess.
I don't know. We'll see if I can connect the dots at some point, but it's definitely one I got to dive into over the winter break. So I'll pick that one up. I appreciate the recommendation, man. Hey, so like any good training session, we end the show with a finisher. So I got 4 quarters, 4 questions for you quick, and maybe overtime at the end, but you can go rapid fire or take your time and expand on any of them. But you ready?
I am.
All right, first one I got for you. Biggest influence in the strength and conditioning profession.
For me personally,
Yeah, for you personally.
probably in how I run my department, Bert, like no question. Like he just was instrumental in teaching me, in instilling values in me of how a weight room should run and what professionalism looks like, and just how to carry yourself as a director and as somebody that's in charge of kind of a lot of stuff. Um, I'll say, yeah, for how I run things, Bert, no question. Um, Programming, uh, tough to say, really. I think, yeah, in the interest of keeping this somewhat rapid fire, I'll just go with Bert. Bert's been a big influence on me.
All right. Hey, so next one I got. When you're not coaching, you're not training outside of the weight room walls, what are some of like the hobbies that you do to like recharge or kind of reset?
Hang out with my wife. I there's again, I'll try to keep this short. There was I grew up with a wonderful, wonderful family, and I'm very, very fortunate for that. I'm just so blessed, and it's a core memory, and it's of us all in the living room watching Whose Line Is It Anyway. And I just remember being a little kid, and the core memory is me just like scanning the room for a second and going, "This is great." And just for some reason, that'll stick with me the rest of my life. And the only other time I've ever felt that is hanging out on the couch with my wife watching Black Sails, or not even watching TV, just sharing a meal with her. So I don't know what I'd be doing without her.
All right, that's a good one. Hey, so if you weren't in the coaching profession, what do you think you would be doing as a job? And if you could go pro in any sport, what would it be?
I don't know what I'd be doing as a job. You know, at the everybody, a popular question is like, what's your why? My why is actually the tagline for my business. It's strengthen the individual. And I don't mean it's a play on words. I'm a strength coach, but I mean strength of character. So the most rewarding part of my job at Flagler is getting an opportunity to serve in a mentorship role to young men and women that I can help them become better people. I can help them develop strength of character. You know, if you're late to a weight session, you do a wall sit. If you're late to work, you might get fired. So I like to think that we're able to help them build that, those life skills, uh, and that helps them benefit. So if that's my why, I could apply that to a lot of different things. Any sort of teaching, any sort of anything that involves mentorship and I just like shepherding, for lack of a better term, young people. Anything like that is going to be fulfilling for me. It just so happens that I found the one that involves lifting weights.
Not a
Uh,
bad one.
Going pro, probably baseball. I'm not even a baseball fan. It's just like after seeing Juan Soto sign for 765 million. And I'm not saying baseball players don't work hard, but if you got a choice between a running back and an outfielder, I know which career I'm taking.
Yeah, I've seen. Have you ever seen any of the broken down like by like plays or minutes or stats of
Oh
like
yeah.
how much those that'll hurt your feelings real quick. Hey, so next one I got for you, like if it's an ideal training day for you, whether there's athletes in the weight room, you're by yourself, you're outside, whatever it is, like what music is playing and what is your favorite post-training meal when all is said and done?
I don't listen to music when I train. And people tell me that's serial killer behavior, which that's fair. Um, the reason is like I'm in the weight room all day, and so it's 10 hours of just, no offense, all my Flagler athletes, but god awful music for the most part. And so my lift is my peace and quiet, actually. So that's the one time I don't want to listen to music. Um, when I did listen to music, it was EDM and Rage Against the Machine, uh, stuff like that. Just hard driving bass, whether there's an electric guitar or a synthesizer, one way or the other. Um, and then post meal would be all you can eat sushi for sure. Like I can put down a I challenge any man to eat more Philadelphia rolls than I could in one sitting. I could put down a lot of those.
All right, I'll give you that one because the cream cheese and sushi is what is usually my crux. That's not what I want. I don't want that in there.
Oh, dude, well, and I've gotten in fights with my wife over if cucumber belongs in sushi or not. And I just think like so like the California roll is like the most everybody gets that, and there's cucumber in it. At least I think there is. And I just think cucumber it just immediately ruins because I can tell that it's in there. It doesn't complement the rest of the palate. It's just, oh, by the way, here's some cucumber.
Good point. Is there a place down in St. Augustine that's your go-to?
I don't do St. Aug. There's it's not all you can eat, but there's a place in St. Aug called Green Papaya, which we've been to from time to time. There's a couple all you can eat places in Jacksonville, one of which I refused to go to because they tried to charge me double for how like I ate too much. Like they told me like, no, you had too much. We're gonna charge you for two people. And I was like, hell no.
No, that's not what
Um,
the sign said.
no, it's not eat a lot of sushi. It's all you can eat. Uh,
Exactly.
but yeah, there's a couple places up in Jax that we'll kind of alternate between.
Yeah, I got a couple up here. I can't remember them. I haven't been to them in a while, but I think there's a new one downtown by the beaches that I've been told is good. And there's one up here. It's not all you can eat either, but Fujiyama is pretty good as well.
Heard of it, yeah.
Pretty good. Hey, so last one I got for you. You can pick either one, or if you got a story for either, but favorite either under the bar memory of yours or favorite coaching memory or first one that kind of comes to mind for you.
There's two coaching memories, one, and they both kind of pertain to what I was talking about, like strengthen the individual. The two best compliments I've ever been paid. Okay, I'll say three. Three best compliments I've ever been paid. One, I got invited to one of my basketball guys' baptism, which meant a lot to me. Um, I worked with a different basketball guy. I worked with him over the summer on his body composition, and it was real simple. He just like tracked all his water, tracked all his protein, and he sent me a screenshot of the numbers every day. And he didn't miss a single day. It was like 90 straight days. He started his own business, and he came back one year and like sought me out, like made a point to like come find me. And he was like doing that. He said this to my face. He said doing that and like tracking those things helped make me better and helped prepare me for tracking my finances when it came to running a successful business. And he like thanked me for helping him learn that. And I just thought that was the dopest thing ever. And then one of my lacrosse girls a couple of years ago asked if I had kids, and I said no. And she said, if you do, I hope they're girls. And I asked her why, and she said, because I think you'd raise strong ones. And so that's probably number one. Like shout out Amanda Fernandez. I think that's just the coolest. That's like one of the coolest things anyone's ever said to me. Under the bar, I really don't know, just because I'm not that proud of any. I mean, I strict pressed. I'd have to think longer about what my best one is, but one that's marginally impressive is I think I hit a 225 strict press double, like a clean, like overhead barbell, no push press whatsoever. I think I hit like a 240 single and a 225 double, and I just know that like my two favorite lifts are overhead press and front squat because people hate them, and so no one does them. So my numbers look a little bit better in comparison. So yeah, like 345 front squat, two plate overhead press. I'd say those two were nice to hit.
Yeah, I don't know if those are anybody's real favorites, but it's nice to kind of be in that category and have it. And it's hard to top the coaching memories, like those kind of invitations from those athletes. Like it shows how much more like what you do and like the time spent and the effort that you do like extends beyond just the weight room and like the training and the numbers. Like it sticks with them too, and it goes through. There's a lot of thought and there's a lot of things that go into inviting someone to one of those, like to a critical event like that, or paying that kind of compliment. You don't say that in jest. So that's awesome. And it's there's no doubt that like that stuck with you for a good reason. So that's awesome, man. Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on today. I know we're like basically a stone's throw away and we're still doing it kind of virtual, but I appreciate your time, man. For anybody that's got any follow-up questions for you, anybody in the area or like that wants to kind of do some consulting with you or want to do some of the seminars or coaching, where can they kind of get a hold of you, get strong performance and everything like that?
Easiest is either my email, and that's just I'll put two. One is Coach G at getstrongperformance.com. Get Strong is spelled with two T's. My school email is just cgettemy at flagler.edu. You can find me on the staff directory. Social media is I'm on Instagram, so at Get Strong Performance, GETT Strong Performance. That's where I'll probably answer the fastest. And that's where you can find like a lot more about what my company is about. So email and Instagram is the way to go.
Awesome. Well, we'll link everything on there. We'll make sure that everybody that's got questions can easily find you. But like I said, man, I appreciate you taking the time today. It's been good to catch up and share you with the rest of the audience and kind of bounce some ideas back and forth. So I appreciate your time. I appreciate everything you're doing down there, man. It's awesome to catch up.
Thanks a lot for having me, man. It's good to see you. Good to catch up, and we'll do it again soon.
Of course, man. I appreciate it. Thanks.
All the best.
That's it for this episode of The Strength Game. Thank you again to this week's guest and to our sponsors. Be sure to connect and keep up with our guests at the links in the description below. Remember to subscribe to us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast provider to stay up to date on all future episodes. Also, check us out on YouTube and CoachO'Brien.com, where you can find all the video versions of these episodes, as well as show notes, episode schedule, and much more. comments, ratings, and reviews are always welcome and appreciated. Thanks again for tuning in, and be sure to join us next week for another great episode of The Strength Game.